how do we eat to become a performance-oriented legend? You've got Chris Hemsworth, who did the foreword to your book, who's none other than Thor, of course, no big deal, doing the foreword to your book. So yeah, what are the foods, tactics, hacks that we can all integrate, everybody listening to this, to integrate to become a performance-oriented legend?
Dude, that's such a great question. It's also quite important that people think of themselves. I know you reference this a lot with bio-individuality. So before we go into the specifics around how we as individuals should be the best we can be, it's also important for us to understand our own self. And so whenever I say this, it's important to understand everything from how you feel to what your stool's telling you, to how your energy's feeling, if you're wearing wearable technology, to actually reference that data and have a look at it. So for that reasoning, it's like we talk about, the difference between omnivorous and being plant-based, in my opinion, the biggest difference is we don't eat enough plants. And there's been significant indicators particularly in our cognitive enhancements and the way that our vagus nerve connected straight to our brain, and the blood-brain barrier and the short-chain fatty acids, which affect, obviously, what go through that blood-brain barrier, are affected by the number of plants. So I think the number one rule out of everything is, regardless if you are omnivorous or if you are plant-based, it is to eat a lot of plants. Bar none.
I like that. What kinds of plants? What are we talking about?
Great question. So everything from nightshades right through to berries, fresh fruit in general, rich in dietary fiber, legumes. I know that some people do not have the enzyme activity to break down a legume successfully. If you are someone who can and does not have the disruptive capabilities of what goes on in your stomach and then has to run to the bathroom, they are shown to be unbelievably beneficial for your protein sources and, more importantly, your dietary fiber. So I would say that they're great sources. I personally love, more than anything, sweet potato. I think sweet potato is like the God's food nectar of anything, because it's a rich source of starchy, dietary fiber, great source of complex carbohydrates. The obviously the beneficial micronutrients you get, and we reference in here, is the 5th macronutrient. But I would look at these really dense, colorful fruits, stone fruits as well. Anything that's rich, particularly seasonal and ideally organic, if you can afford it, is preferential. But if the best way to look at it is, if you think about your plate throughout the week, and if you are missing a particular color, because a color, as we now know, is directly correlated to a pigmentation, and a pigmentation is directly correlated to a micronutrient. So if you're not eating a spectrum of the different colors, you're probably missing out on a certain type of micronutrient, which is going to be super instrumental for some sort of metabolic pathway.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the pigments are huge. I mean, you could look at at blue or purplish foods that are like, in that bucket would fall blueberries. You've got red onions, purple potatoes. And those are attributed to the anthocyanin content, right? Which we know are like really beneficial from the standpoint of brain health. They're powerful antioxidants. You've got carotenoids like lutein and zeaxanthin, which I'm a huge fan of, beta carotene, which is abundant in sweet potatoes. So great. But let's break it all down. So legumes. What's so great about legumes? And like, when you say legumes, what do you mean by that? Because I know, like, if you're French, right, legume means something completely different.
I'm talking, great note, man. So you can look everything from the natural lipids you see in a lot of the lentils as such. Like, that's a great, lentils in general. Like, dude, do you like dal? Have you ever had dal? Dude, like
Indian dish, right?
Yeah, bro, unbelievable dish. But it's also a great source of dietary fiber, which again is directly correlated to a certain lock and key effect when it comes to your short chain fatty acid. So we look at that and say, okay, what other group of cohorts does that come from? You can also look at chickpeas, somewhat broader terms of being a part of the legumes. Same with navy beans, cannellini beans, even kidney beans, black beans. Black beans, in terms of their protein content, are just superior. So yes, I think the argument for people is like, well, if I have all these things, I have some sort of gastro problems, which is, some people just do. So just really understand you from a bio-individuality standpoint is so important. There also is more starch, which just means, okay, well, if you're someone who's being very specific on the amount of carbohydrates you are taking in, just make sure that you're also counting the fact that you're adding additional. That's why black beans in general are amazing, and other legumes, is because they also contain carbs. People say, like, well, they contain carbs. I'm like, Yes, they do.
Your words are so powerful that our bookshelf just
the bulldog moves around.
Dismantled. Yeah. Okay, so carbs aren't bad.
I know.
So many people are afraid of carbs. Where do you think that comes from? And do you think that that's misguided?
I mean,
that carb fear.
Yes, in so many formats, in the sense that I think people are following amazing individuals in their own right who are inspiring, but they're leading them down a path where, like, people are avoiding carbs because of all the, in my opinion, bespoke sciencey, material that could be a small fraction of an actual study to determine the actual benefit of its, I guess, longevity if you were to put it into an actual realistic expectation. And what I mean by that is, carbs aren't bad for you. We do need them metabolically to survive. Now, whether you have a small amount or a large amount, we still need them. People say they really support well off keto. Like you work well off ketos, right?
Yeah, I'm not ketogenic though. I'm not currently on a ketogenic diet.
Right. Yeah. We've all seen the benefit of doing that, but in doses, and I think that's really good to refresh the system, whether you're doing some sort of intermittent fast or you find yourself, just needing to have, almost like its own autophagenic. How do you say that in a autophagy? Yeah, that kind of effect, but with carbohydrate resistance as well. So here's my thought. Carbs. So why are they good for you? Well, they are a really important form of looking after not only our metabolic system, our sheer function for energy, ATP. Where do we draw that from? There's sources of glycogen. Yes, you can also get from fat metabolism, but the best and most efficient source, particularly at a certain form of performance, is from carbohydrates. And I think the reason why people were getting somewhat affected by them was simply because around the notion of, fat's like, well, firstly, we had this whole thing with media kind of fucked up everything. And then, so as a result, people took advantage of that. Then clickbait technology came around. And so people have been following these people who are on these warpasses saying that, kale is bad for you as well. Don't eat carbs. And you're like, okay, well, support me with evidence to suggest that our bodies can survive for more than 5 years and on an ongoing basis without carbohydrate sources. And I'll be like, okay, that's fine. So my argument is simply that the body has been shown consistently that we need carbohydrates to support not only our metabolic pathway, but our sheer ability to perform through energy. And without it, we wouldn't be able to do so on a long-term scale.
Well, you have a unique vantage point also because you work with high-performing athletes, do you not?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, like, I think at this point it's fairly irrefutable that carbohydrates they're a fantastic, I don't know if you could necessarily say that they're the best, but they're definitely a source of fuel that many, if not most, professional athletes rely on for high intensity work, high intensity output.
They have an absolute role. We say they have a role, right? Just like fat has a role, protein has a role, micronutrients have a role. And to kind of break this down, if you didn't know, at a high intensity effort, your main source of energy comes from the form of fuel of carbohydrates. Once you deplete that carbohydrate source, you then turn to fat. And hopefully this doesn't have to be the case. If you deplete fat as well, you go to protein, which causes a lot of problems. Just a lot of byproducts can affect the brain. We won't go into that. But effectively, that's why we talk about having a big source of carbohydrate and glycogen storage, particularly around like athletes and when they need to use it. Now, some athletes, depending on the type of modality they're in, don't require as much as others. And conversely, it can be the same. And now we're looking at not just applying this to athletes, but everyday legends. And so that's where it's important to understand that, if you're someone who's trying to give a presentation, get a promotion, look after your family, maybe you are trying to run a 10K or you're trying to be a better person yourself, it's important to understand your energy systems and therefore the fuel sources that they're coming from. So with carbohydrates, if you're working at a high intensity effort, but you're trying to look at burning fat, then maybe, if you're trying to lose weight, then maybe having a lower amount of carbohydrates, not completely, minimal, but like a lower amount will lead you to burning fat quicker, which has been the science for a long time. It's been talked about having a low carbohydrate diet against a high fat, high protein will support fat loss because you get quicker to the fat to actually burn. The thing about this is you can also talk about, and don't go on this tangent, fat's not just important for insulation, it is so important for hormonal health. So, it's important that we don't look at fat as a bad thing, just like carbs these days has looked its bad, fat also had its poor moment too. And that was a lot to the start of like media. We have Ansel Keys and that whole dilemma, which I won't go down. But essentially, we should be encouraged to eat whole food carbohydrates. So we're talking the sources of blueberries, fruit, rich source of dietary fiber, rich stone fruits, sweet potatoes, brown rice, depending on athletic ability. You know, people should be enjoying pasta. I know it's like, this is a guy who does have a fast metabolism and is quite athletic, but even for the average individual, I look at a lot of people and I would say majority of the time is we do not eat enough of the right energy source to perform at our peak.
I very occasionally will indulge in some like legume-based pastas. What are your thoughts on those? Like, I'll do like chickpea pastas and the like. There's phenomenal options now on the market.
Yeah, this is a great topic, man. Like, you're seeing the way that I see CPG products, and like you definitely have the ones that, you know, there was an article in the New York Times, I don't know if you saw it, about sodium the other day, and it talked about the biggest misconception around what we believe we're having sodium-wise and what we're not having. So you looked at, they gave you 10 different options to choose from, and you chose between a packaged good versus, say, a cheese, and you were looking at, you know, which one do you think had more sodium in it? You know, most people didn't realize how much sodium they're having based on the packaged good. And so we've gone through this whole phase of packaged goods pretty much owned by big food are really bad for you when it comes to sodium count. So that's its own topic. But that's led to a lot of these other products like struggling to come out of the shadows of packaged good being bad for you. And we're now seeing technology such as like, Bunza, for example, chickpea pasta based out of legumes. Like, I'd say people say like, okay, this has still got maybe a couple of seed oils in it, or like little bits of seed oil. I'm like, yeah, but it's on the right path to get there. It's like when we first saw cauliflower and gnocchi rock up at Trader Joe's. We're like, oh my God, this movement around health and wellness, people have been listening to the Genius Life enough to make a statement. But I would say, man, that I love the pastas that are high in protein from legumes because they're getting the right sources of dietary fiber along with the protein. The issue comes in the practical application. So like, I know, and this is the little pro tip, if you're ever having a gluten-free or a legume-based pasta, super important to have a high heat, boiling, salted water, and to actually, if you really have the time to perfect it, you should actually cook the pasta, undercook it. After you take it off the heat, so strain it out, it should be still semi-hard, but you want to rinse it under cold water to stop it from cooking, and then quickly drop it back in another pot of hot water. The reason for this is the typical pasta, because they've been going through this, an alternative process, they have a little bit of like this excess gluey kind of feel to them. So what you want to do is rinse that off through the cold water and then refresh them in hot water afterwards, and you get like more of that al dente kind of feel. Just a kind of practical application around cooking.
That sounds so good.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, I grew up eating pasta. I grew up eating like wheat-based pasta, and to me, it's a no-brainer that the more that these wheat alternative pastas like the chickpea, they have like red lentil pastas now on the market. Yeah, they're so much more nutrient dense. Yeah, it's like a no-brainer, easy, healthy swap to make.
Totally. Plus, your brain wins as a result as well. It's like you're just adding more fiber plants, like wins in the whole sphere of what you're trying to eat every single week.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us about your background, because I know you're a restaurateur, you're a professional chef, you work with all kinds of athletes, you're a performance coach. Walk us through your background.
Dude, so I did a master's degree in exercise science. Obviously, I'm not from, south part of LA. So I'm from Sydney, Australia. I did my master's degree in Australia. And then I was a strength conditioning coach, particularly specializing in GPS tracking, a lot of data control. And at the same time, I found myself being super interested in nutrition. So I applied to do an extension of that with my degree. At the same time, I'd been cooking at home for my family since I was like 11 years old. And it's like 9 years later. So I went through this whole, poor period of like my family putting up with my crap meals to then like them actually really enjoying the fact that I didn't have to cook as much. So I could understand the base of home cooking. And so what happened was I decided to support my nutritionists at the athletic teams, because I could see they were they were struggling to connect with the athletes. Whereas like on the S&C side, I had a pretty good relationship with them. She would tell me what they needed nutritionally. I would just put into a recipe and they would apply them to simply just take it home and do it. And they loved it. So like over a course of 6 weeks, I actually did that with about 20 athletes, and we created like a little cooking school, and it was a lot of fun. And I turned that into a cookbook with all the recipes I did and self-published that. And that led me to gain some media exposure, and I kind of realized that cooking was actually my heart and soul, and into this world of health and wellness, now I can change the game. So after doing some more media, I jumped back into the restaurant game, and actually by night I was a dishwasher. By day I was an S&C coach, and I'd go to different restaurants and just learn from chefs. And then over a period of time, I became a prep cook, a line cook, and eventually one of them was like, "We need you to be a full-time sous chef." So I did that, and then I ended up releasing another book, which did well enough to get noticed by America. So then after being an executive chef in Australia, I moved to America on a book deal, and that was like 8.5 years ago, and kind of started again. But it was, through my consistency of my personal messaging, just like you, mate, where you being super consistent in what you do. And that puts out enough SEO to essentially what happened was Google would be having me top of mind when it came to like healthy cooking, the healthy chef, sport, all that kind of stuff. And I was speaking on all these panels and talking about the importance of what we're talking about right now. And that led me to getting some opportunities such as Under Armour. UA put me as the performance chef of Lindsey Vonn during the Pyeongchang Olympics. And that kickstarted my career over here working with a lot of athletes individually. So I was the performance chef for these athletes. And that led me to like truly understand athletes working at the highest level and how they perform, what they need, how not too different they are to the average individual, truly. And then through that experience, I learned to communicate that on a social level. So content and being able to make it more apparent to everybody how you can really achieve success through your own lens of food. So I came up with my own theories, my own principles that I supported through a lot of my friends doing research. And then in turn, I was still loving the food game. So I ended up opening up Charlie Street, which you've been to, and got to eat at. And then we did my podcast downstairs. And that kind of led me to realizing, like, in this world, if you are really here to make a difference, like you have to consistently be, you have to be consistent, you have to be determined, and you have to be changing the game, pioneering. If I knew I wanted to put out recipes, if I knew that I want to be, putting things forward, I had to create a studio kitchen allowing me to do that. I had to build a team, so I had to find ways to garner that, invest in myself. But I would say every single time I've done something, it's because I've truly wanted to, through my gut, knowing that I'm going to go all in on it. And it's led me to things that's, people say things pop into your lap. It's like, well, you pop into your lap because it's where the opportunity intersects preparedness. And so One Hotels, for example, that's been approached, and I've started working with them for the past year as the exec chef in Brooklyn, and intentionally across the broader spectrum, has allowed me to be like a chef now that understands athletic performance. So I've kind of got my point of difference in pioneering. And then I've got my distribution channels of how I can help share my message. So you've got obviously your social platforms, you've got your cookbooks, you've got your different interaction of brands you can work with. And that's kind of it, man. Like, my mission is to help continue to find ways to help people eat their way through to a positive performance in themselves, and finding, meeting people like you and just being able to interact and learn more is always the way it's going to be. But yeah, continue to just stay the course. I
love that. And so have you established like an overarching dietary philosophy, like a nutritional philosophy for yourself? Is it like an omnivorous approach?
For me, this is the biggest thing, right? So like what I said earlier about bio-individuality, it's so real. I've done plant-based. I've done omnivorous. I can't say I've tried being, just meat, because I can't do it. Like I tried to do it for a few days and just wasn't for me. And the reason why I try those things is simply so I can actually give personal reflections on that journey. But to that point, my biggest philosophy is bio-individuality around food. So what I love and what I enjoy and what my body does is not the same as the person next to me. And we know that through genes. We know that some people work differently based on certain carbohydrates. That's why we see a range of a macronutrient profiling based on the individual. That's why we have deficiencies in micronutrients, because either you don't have the same lifestyle choices, or you're not consuming at the rate that your body needs. So my overarching principle is, I eat the way that I eat. It's the best diet. The best diet for me is the one that I need, right? The one that suits me. That's what I say for you. I say for everybody. How do you get there? Okay, so that's where you need to work out what that is. And a lot of it comes to understanding your body. Again, going back to understanding your stool, your bowel movements is a huge indicator. So I think base level 1, do you feel crap Okay, if you do, then a lot of it could be consistently around your food intake. How is your stomach? Is it talking to you? Is it growling? Yeah, you're going to have some issues there. What's your stool like? There is something called a Bristol stool chart. Have you heard of this thing?
Yeah.
Dude, it's crazy.
But walk us through it.
Okay, so you got the Bristol stool chart. This thing's awesome. Essentially has a range from 1 to, I think it's 9 or 7. I can't remember. Anyway, essentially 1 is like puddle, all right? Whereas 9 on the other extreme is hard as rock. You effectively call it the rock stool, right? You want to be somewhere in the middle, like 3 or 4. Makes sense. It's 7. So 1 to 7. So 3 or 4 is kind of where you want your sweet spot to be. And that's like solid enough to hold its structural integrity, but not too hard that it hasn't got any moisture to it. And if you're having that consistently, and then also if your timing in terms of the amount of times you're going, your bowel movements, if they are regular. And what I mean by that, if you are someone who is going to the bathroom for your whole life twice a day, awesome. But if you're someone who like goes once a day and then all of a sudden you go to like 4 or 5 times a day, you've got a problem. And that's not necessarily bad if you're quick onto it, but continuously doing this means you're not absorbing nutritional value. You may be lacking dietary fiber or a particular type of fiber. It could be even worse. But what I've noted is like, for example, chickpeas, we've talked about, tremendously nutritionally beneficial for you. But unfortunately, not all people can have them. So people have been talking about eating chickpeas and how good they are for you. And all of a sudden, people go, actually, I always feel a little bit like, in the stomach afterwards. I'm like, well, maybe you have to ease up on the amount of legumes you're having, right? Some people are fine. And again, that comes down to listening to your body. And then I say my second philosophy point is it's less about where you get your protein sources. It's more about the amount of plants you are having weekly. So 2 major things. Bioindividuality, know your gut. You can also then go to like biomarker testing. So companies like Hone, that test your biomarkers, tell you what you're deficient in, and then you can find a way to then support that through Whole Foods. So say you can do an at-home blood test. It's a quantitative affordable way to go, okay, I now know that my iron levels are down, right? Okay, I just simply need to look at foods that can take more iron and also vitamin C, which is really important. That's another thing. It's like having these things in groups is important. It's just not about the proteins, fats, and carbs. You need to have your 5th macronutrient. You need to have your source of iron, your vitamin C, everything to support the absorption and bioavailability of these ingredients. So yeah, I think that they're the main 2 things I look at, and there's a great way you can get tested, whether it just be firstly looking into yourself, looking at your stool, and then finally working out quantitatively what your biomarkers are.
Wow. You've talked about the 5th macronutrient.
Yeah.
And so you've got 5 macronutrients that you talk about in your book.
Yeah.
Walk us through what those are.
Okay, so the ones that people mostly know, protein, fats, and carbs. Then you've got the 4th one, which we don't talk about, very obvious, water. And then you got the 5th one. Now, the 5th one is a self-proclaimed kind of 5th macronutrient. So it's not like anything you ever see anywhere else. I'm like, I haven't seen this before. This Chef Dan guy's brought up this thing. Essentially is that macronutrients in general aren't that sexy. They're complex. They can be a little bit intimidating, but I would say maybe call it a dogmatic approach or just simplicity behind marketing. But we always look at protein. Very easy to look at that in a box and go, I know how much protein I'm getting. Carbohydrates and fat, similar, right? You look at numbers, you relatively know. Like we've been brought up enough to have a habitual nation to look at protein, fats, and carbs. What we haven't been brought up enough yet is to talk about, B12. Like you and I can talk about B12, thiamine, all these kind of things and know what it is. The average individual doesn't yet. And unfortunately, that has led to the neglection of this whole important source of micronutrients, trace minerals, everything. So what I've done is simply just said, let's call it the 5th macronutrient to give it the same sex appeal as all the other macronutrients so that everyone now actually refers to it on the same level of respect and importance as the others. And I put into a cohort. And the most important thing about that is if you look at your plate, I would say majority of your 5th macronutrient just come from plants. So again, we talked about at the start of the episode. You look at all the trace minerals, nuts, seeds, everything else coming out of those important forms as well. Your blueberries, everything like that. Blueberries with sleep, all these kind of things. You can have your protein, fats, and carbs, but if you don't have your micronutrients to support their pathways for them to be, broken down, them synthesized, they may as well just be floating around your system, doing nothing and going to the bathroom and getting to be expelled. Because this stuff over here, the macronutrients, is just as important for the functionality and the digestion and use for your fuel as they are for themselves.
What would you say, zooming out and looking at the way that most Americans are eating and the health problems that we have in this country, as effectively an outsider, right? You're Aussie.
Sure.
What would you say are the biggest problems today facing Westerners more broadly, I guess, with regard to their health, their nutrition?
Yeah, man, I think I'd like to say the biggest problem I still think is education and the effect of big food on particularly, broader scale America, because our access to certain foods is now becoming talked about a lot, but I feel when I see the decisions of what I can make, it's easy for me to say, I live in New York City, so my access to certain foods, be it more expensive, I still can make the informed decision. If I travel to Nebraska or some of those areas, which I love going to, by the way, they're so welcoming, I still see limitations in what we can get access to. And so I think it's going to be a slow transition, but what I do get excited by is as I said earlier, like you see the things of like cauliflower gnocchi in Trader Joe's. Now, it may not be the best thing for you, but seeing the direction that we're trying to make as a whole to change that mentality of what taste and sex appeal is in healthy food, we are definitely, more than anything, consuming way too much refined sugar. Refined sugar is just absolutely killing people. I don't need to go into the metabolic problems and dysfunction it causes, but I'd say if we could just simply do one thing and just cut out refined sugar, it would change. Not only would it, save a lot of money for the American system, it would just save so much health and lives. Like it's crazy. We now know that. You look at diabetes, and even Alzheimer's has been referred to as the diabetes number 3. It's like you can see how some of these extend from just simple lifestyle choices. So number one, I'd say, is if you could change one thing, it'd be helping people cut out refined sugar.
How do you identify that on labels?
It's a really good question. I think anything with the term sugar in them is obvious. So that's a refined sugar. The ones that gets complicated is like the multi-dextrones and this artificial sweeteners and the things that, the people get paid a lot of money to hide on certain labels and use big words that kind of intimidate people. So, I'm sure do you have a list of sweeteners somewhere in a toolkit people can reference?
Yeah. I mean, there's at one end of the spectrum, you got high fructose corn syrup, which is obviously synthetically produced, right?
It's
you don't find high fructose corn syrup growing naturally in any plant, right? No, but then you have some sugars that I think many people look at as being more benign, like coconut sugar and maple syrup and things like that. How do you contextualize those different sugar types? Is one better for you than another?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way I look at it is simply put, you got sugar, table sugar is like, high fructose corn syrup is the absolute worst in my opinion, right? So I'd say that's one end of the spectrum. You've got confectionery, iced sugar, all those kind of things there too. Then you've got, I would say what you're going through now is like coconut and forms of dehydrated versions that have of existing maybe plants or something from plants that have been sweetened, right? Concentrated to be sweetened. They're still refined because they've gone through a process of refinement, but they contain a little more extra minerals that would be better than just your typical high fructose corn syrup. Do they still have the effect of insulin? Yes, they still spike your insulin. So it's kind of like, be aware of that, right? It's kind of, again, case by case. But I'd say that's less of a concern as this one, because I still think majority of people are consuming the high fructoses without even realizing. And like we saw some stuff around honey, where you saw some companies put honey as well as actual honey, high fructose corn syrup and honey in packaged goods, and it's cheaper because corn is very cheap commodity.
Yeah.
So I'd say there's that, and then you got like dates, which is like the like super sweet, natural state, been dehydrated, all these kind of things. So like then you've got that one. So I'd say like they're the 3 buckets. They actually have similar effects in terms of consuming them will provide you a spike in insulin. But the worst case of all of them is the one we mentioned first. Then you've got like the coconut sugars of the world, and then you've got like your peaches, raspberries, and yeah, I'd even honestly put honey in this category, like in between the berries and the fruit and like the coconut sugars of the world.
But you're right. There are some like interesting bioactive like compounds, right? In honey and maple syrup, probably even in date sugar. But it's like hard to quantify in the levels that you would typically consume them. Like how many grams of sugar do you need from those respective sweeteners would you need to consume to derive any real value from those micronutrients found in those sweeteners. It's like very hard to quantify. And at the end of the day, I mean, you're still ingesting a lot of sugar calories when you consume them en masse, as most people do.
It's like with salt, and people say, "Oh, it's not too salty. I'm going to add a bit more salt." And the fact you have to add more salt means that, sometimes you're adding a type of salt that's not that, high in saltiness, if you will, best way of putting it. But you end up adding so much because it took you so much of maybe a less quality salt to get you to where you needed to be, but you ended up consuming more of it in the end. It's the same with sweetener. Like, the problem with some of these sugars is I don't love sweetness too much, right? Like, I love dark chocolate. I'm I'm weird. I like roasted cashews. It's like my guilty pleasure, which is kind of weird. But like raspberries with a little bit of honey is enough for me. But for someone who's been brought up on a sweet palate, like if you add coconut sugar, it may not be sweet enough. So you may end up having too much of the coconut sugar because in order to get the satisfaction you want, you add too much compared to what, something else would be. So, and that's the challenge we face. I think it's just more, we just need to talk about it more. We need to continue to find ways that will intrinsically motivate individuals to understand. I think that's the thing. Like, I'm so excited by my life and like our lives and the way we live and like the things we get to learn about how to, whether it be biohack or learn how we best perform, that you want to share it to the world. And I think that's what I'm excited by. I'm excited by the fact that we're now having more and more platforms to share it. And whilst that's exciting from my perspective, there's a lot of things that come about with responsibility and, people use it to their advantage for clickbait purposes to make money and shit. But that's another pathway.
Whole different story. Yeah. I think the worst thing about high fructose corn syrup is that it's not necessarily that its metabolic effects are distinct from, as you alluded to so perfectly, so brilliantly, from coconut sugar and these other more natural forms of sugar. It's that it's like the perfect surrogate indicator of what an ultra processed food is. Like most people are not typically cooking at home, making home fresh baked goods with high fructose corn syrup.
Nope.
So chances are, if a product that you're eating has high fructose corn syrup in it, it's probably a product that you're better off not eating because it's an ultra processed food product.
100%. I will say the one big issue with high fructose corn syrup, just due to the makeup of its, the way its complex is, it attacks the liver directly, which is a huge issue. So, it's to be honest, like, all issues of anything too much is like, you can have broccoli overdosing and you can have a problem, but we just need to eat a shit ton of broccoli to get there, right? But I'd say, like, the thing about it, you said, high fructose corn syrup isn't something we buy at the store. You just see it in particularly food service or big packaged foods from Big Food. And as a result, it's a huge indicator that you should probably not trust that product at all, or that company, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. What are the benefits that people stand to gain from and reap from cooking at home more? Because, I mean, you walk this interesting line, right, where you just put out a cookbook encouraging people to cook at home more often, but you're also a restaurateur. You've got this like amazing restaurant actually in New York City. But cooking at home, I feel like, is such a big point of leverage for most people. What are the benefits of that?
I think, honestly, in itself, it's like, one, it's a life skill. Like, and I know that sounds like, okay, cool, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, dude, like, at the end of the day, you can look after yourself. And I find that to be huge in itself. It's like learning to tie your shoe is on the same path as learning to cook, right? Yeah. Back in the day, we didn't have Postmates, we didn't have Uber, we didn't have all these things that allowed us to, at the click of a button, get food. But I would say, I think it's important that you can then teach your kids, your grandchildren, how to do something that's really fundamentally good for your health. Number 2, education. So, you may pick up a capsicum or a pepper or some sort of fruit, some sort of veg, and you may just get a little bit more intrigued with it because you cook with it for once. And so it may lead you to actually understanding more about life through the lens of a food. For example, tomatoes being fruit and like where they're grown, how they're grown, the climatic conditions of something. You may not start off being super into something, but we are absolutely right now just spoiled for the fact we can go to a grocery store and a kid won't know that tomatoes aren't meant to be grown right now, or they are now, but during the winter time. And so getting a true taste of what tomatoes are, understanding where it came from, how it got to where it is, understanding life. I understand my body through food, because we think about everything, we all need rest, we all need food and water, and we need to rinse and repeat that, right? So in order to perform, it's the same thing with the way that food is. If food is not being provided enough soil retention, soil repair, and then also the nutrients, it's not going to value itself in terms of what's putting into your body to then for you make the right decisions where you got it from. So I think education is so much in food. I love the idea of what food does in bringing people together. I love that social connection. Whether it be for yourself or just like finally having time for you or being able to spend it with loved ones. That's why I initially fell in love with food. So that's the third thing, a reason why people chance to gain from it. And also, you never know, like for guys out there who have not got a girlfriend yet, learn how to cook. All right. I'll just leave it at that. The fourth thing is, when you cook at home, you're less likely to use preservatives and crap in your food. And so therefore, on a whole food scale, your food will be much better for you. So you look at all four of those things, comes to a product of time these days of people being able to do it. There's plenty of ways you can get around that by just honestly putting a bit of 30 minutes into planning your week with food. But all of that's to say there's so many more benefits than just the nutritional value from cooking at home.
Yeah, I mean, the community aspect that you mentioned is so important. It's such an underappreciated contributor to good health. In fact, it might be the most important. I mean, nutrition and food nerds like you and I mean, we could talk about micronutrients and macronutrients until the cows come home, right? But when push comes to shove, I mean, we have like studies like the Harvard study on human flourishing, I think it's called, or whatever the name of that study is. It's that 80-year-long study led by Robert Waldinger. We've had him on the podcast in the past. The number one predictor of healthy aging is like the strength of your relationships. And insofar as like food can help to mediate and cultivate those relationships, the relationships in your life, I mean, it's such a powerful vehicle.
It is, man. Like
for good health beyond just the nutrients that it contains.
Yeah, I think that's the, you look at the Blue Zones, the one thing they have in commonality, it's like they have this community. They all they just seem to live such a positive, healthy life. And interaction with people is something that we lost for a good couple of years due to COVID. Now that we can do it again, personally, one of the biggest things I lost was the ability, I realized how important social community is. I get so much out of it. Like I'm willing to put events on out of my own pocket just to have my friends meet other people because I get so much out of that, like personally. So I think we when we talk about health in general, we typically not now anymore, but we used to think of health and be like, okay, how much body fat percentage do you have? And how do you and how much chicken and broccoli are you eating? Mm-hmm. That was like health back in the day. Now we've included, I guess, spiritual in a certain sense, mental, cognitive, and social. And you think about all those things like, okay, cool, well, you may look like you're a bodybuilder, but you may be super unhappy. But if I'm going over and bringing a plate to dinner to my friend's house, having this round glass of red, everyone's together, it is such a good time. And I don't care if the Sunday football's on or whatever. It's it's the best feeling to enjoy finally just catching up with your friends. It's also a time that typically you're away from drama. And so you're finding yourself actually conversing over conversations that matter. And that doesn't even have to be on a Sunday. It could be the next time you sit down with someone who truly matters to you, whether it be your girlfriend, boyfriend, your partner, or even just to yourself, you can have a moment that is super direct. And I think right now, more than ever, that's something we really need to be exercising, and food is a great tool for us to be able to do that.
Absolutely. My favorite gift to bring to a friend's house, if I'm invited over for dinner, it used to be a bottle of wine.
Nice.
That's sort of the de facto gift to bring over. Yeah, it's a great gift. It's a great gift. I'm not knocking bringing wine to somebody's house. It's always appreciated. Mm-hmm. But now I bring a nice bottle of extra virgin olive oil.
Let's go, dude.
Yeah, I think it's such a great gift to go and buy a nice bottle with a nice label on it, fresh, make sure that there's a harvest date on it. It's you're not because alcohol, look, I imbibe every now and then, but ethanol is a neurotoxin, right?
Totally.
we can't overlook that fact that
Totally.
It's ultimately not a health food. To be able to bring over a nice extra virgin olive, it's roughly the same price.
It is, man. I was literally calculating the price in my head as you said that. So if you look at any between you go to the grocery store, people typically get the $15 to $20 bottle maybe of olive oil, maybe $15 bottle of olive oil, right? If you go buy a 25 to 30 bottle of olive oil, it's a good olive oil, but it's the same price you would spend on a lower end bottle that you'd take over to your friend's house, depending on what you like them. But it's that's the thing. Dude, that is such a good gift. I'm going to start calling that the Max effect.
Max effect. Yeah. Normalize bringing over extra virgin olive oil as a gift. Because also like you finish food with it. You can keep it at the center of the table.
Ah, yeah, dude. There's nothing like. So here's the thing about like the polyphenols you get from that experience. So if you didn't realize this, guys, like listening in. So a little quick background on olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is the gold standard of olive oil. It is the very first press. Essentially what happens is the olives are picked, they're put into a canister. That canister is then pressed down and the beautiful coloration of rich green to golden yellow flavor to be extracted from that is the most nutrient dense, best flavor, quite peppery typically, olive oils that you'll ever have, right? So that is extracted. What happens then? So you got phase one, that beautiful extra virgin olive oil. That canister then goes back up again, and then they press it again down. This is then known as olive oil. Less valuable, a little bit more pale as the first one, but still a little bit fatty. It doesn't have quite many polyphenols and benefits out of it, but you still get some juices. Then you've got the third one, which is light olive oil. Now people used to think light olive oil was the best thing. This is where like we think of like light milk and light cream cheese and all these things. And you're like, oh no, people are getting confused. The light olive oil is where they turn the canister on, they heat it up. So it denatures everything, but allows you to squeeze out more of the olives. And then you get this like almost like translucent olive, like white kind of looking number. So if you're going to the store, as Max already alluded to, pick up extra virgin olive oil. And people say, can I cook with extra virgin olive oil? The higher the quality, the more you can fry with it. Right? I know that's a huge statement that people will be like, what? But give me a study to show that high quality extra virgin olive oil becomes rancid because you don't have less compounds that will then oxidize, and I will be ready to go. If you have one, I'd love to see it.
No, I don't think that study exists because the antioxidant capacity of extra virgin olive oil is so rich that it literally prevents the oxidation of the fats. I mean, olive oil is already chemically very stable because it's like primarily monounsaturated fat, but then it has this abundance of antioxidants in it that help to further protect that oil under high heat.
100%, dude. Also tastes awesome, man.
Tastes amazing. Yeah. Tastes amazing. And with light extra virgin olive oil, I mean, you're getting just the same fat quantity. I mean, it's just as calorie dense. It's just as much. You're getting the same fats essentially, but you're getting shortchanged because you're not getting any of those polyphenols, those antioxidants, that anti-inflammatory potential that extra virgin olive oil has.
Which is interestingly to note is the color change as well, which is where all those polyphenols, all those benefits come from, right? So you actually noted it. So like you look at the change, you get the same calories without the extras that you want, right? So you're getting the crap, nothing to stand for it. So it's again another example of where color is so important to understanding our micronutrient value and most importantly our flavor. We talked earlier about the pigmentation relationship. So pigments relate to obviously having some sort of micronutrient relationship. They also are contrasted with an actual flavor profile. So the pigment, not only color, but also a particular flavor. So the denser the color, the more the flavor.
I love that. When it comes to eating more vegetables, because that's obviously something that it's a message that you're super passionate about delivering. I think a lot of people have this misconception or this perception rather that vegetables just don't taste good. I mean, I encounter a lot of people that just don't like eating vegetables. As a chef, I mean, what are some simple ways to make vegetables more appetizing, more palatable at home?
Oh man, this is a step in my office. So like effectively, what I said earlier about being able to pick foods all the time. So like that's the problem with getting foods from grocery stores, not from markets, be it like convenience is a factor. So I understand that. But we find ourselves getting something that's all year round when reality is it's not climatically benefited from all year round growth. So like there's certain times of the year that certain things were created because the light, the soil, the heat, the humidity, and the amount of water coming through were optimized for it. So basil, for example, is best grown in Genova, Italy, where we have pasta genovese for a reason, because that's pasta with pesto in it from the basil of that region. So that's the reason why we have those things. So for that reason, I feel people try vegetables when they're out of season on a continuous basis. Have you ever tasted tomato like in winter? It tastes crap. Like I don't like it. Like it's
chalky.
Exactly. So I think again, coming down to education is like, one, if people can understand when things are in season and try to defer to that as best as possible, granted we have kids and stuff like that we have to look after. I think that makes things a lot easier when you can do that. The next thing is like, use spices. Spices rock. Like we have a dish on the menu. It's our eggplant. We essentially roast the skin of an eggplant. Very simple to do. Peel the skin. We flatten it out and fry it on a flat top, which you can just do in a fry pan that's been coated in spices. Serve it with some sort of yogurt, labna or coconut yogurt. And dude, it is delicious. Same with tofu. Like I was the first person to say tofu to me, I wasn't a fan. Making tofu sexy is become a life's mission because I think it can be, right? Again, simply salt and pepper, get a nice little crust on each side, finish it with spices. It's so good. And mushrooms, you just need salt. Like olive oil, garlic, chopped mushrooms, rosemary, thyme, squeeze of lemon juice. Enough said.
I think we made mushrooms together when I was in your podcast studio.
We did make mushrooms, bro. You lost your shit. You were like, these are the best mushrooms I've ever had.
Yeah, they were damn good. They were damn good.
But yeah, I think the last thing I'd say about that is in general is I talk about this in the book. In order to eat like a legend, you have to cook like one. And one of the biggest principles around cooking is seasoning and knowing understanding of seasoning. So I do this thing, I break it down in the book, but I'll share it today. It's like, okay, so making cooking relatable is 100% what I do. And how do I do that when it comes to understanding how to season? So seasoning's broken down into, I would say, 5 different taste and flavor profiles, but today we'll just do 3. So you've got salt, acid or sour, and sweetness. So salt, if you've got a big party, which is what we want our mouth to be, we want our mouth to be a party, salt isn't something that adds flavor. It brings out the natural flavor because science bespoke is you add salt to something, it removes moisture. So if you've got moisture and you've got flavor and you add salt, you concentrate the flavor. The problem is when you add too much salt and you're left with salty food as opposed to the flavor. So there's a balance there. But what you want to do is when you're tasting your food, if you're tasting a mushroom and you don't actually taste its full potential or what it should be, it needs some salt because you need to add some salt to it. So it's like salt is the club promoter. It brings everyone to the party. It brings the flavor there. But it only gets you to the front door and past the security guard. Once you're in the party wants to be a vibe. They want people to stick around. And that's what acidity does. So DJ is your acidity. By making people dance, have a good time, acidity is how the flavor sticks around for a long time. So what I mean by that is when you're tasting food and whilst it's there, it goes away really quickly. It's missing acidity. So you need to add acid in the form of lemon juice, lime juice, red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, balsamic vinegar, sherry vinegar. Any of those are acidic. Even tomatoes are acidic. So that's why we look at acid as a way of thinking, okay, is the flavor lasting? Is it there? So it doesn't have salt. Is it lasting? And the last thing is sweetness is the final kick in this area, but it also keeps everything in check. So sweetness is the security guard. It makes sure it tosses out anyone that's, causing a ruckus. So when you get to the finish of the acidity, does it finish strong? That's where the sweetness comes in. So whether it be touch of honey or some sort of fruit or in anything, it could just be simply its own sense of the fruit of the tomato, for example, being concentrated by having moisture, i.e. simmering, take its place. So in order to think about how to make vegetables sexy and awesome, think about seasoning like a legend because lemon juice for one is amazing. Salt, natural salt, flaky salt, coarse salt, great for you. Just make sure you're not having packaged foods as well because then your salt intake will be too high.
Have you been to a place in LA called Great White? It's a cafe called Great. It's an Australian place, actually.
I go there I go there pretty much every day.
Seriously?
Yeah.
They've got some of the best. They're that good that's how memorable they are. They've got some of the best tomatoes I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, man.
I always get what's called the Great White Brekkie.
Oh yeah, bro.
There at Great White. Shout out to Great White. They have locations in West Hollywood, on Larchmont. There's one on the west side in Venice.
Dude, it's crazy.
And it's this incredible it's a full Australian breakfast.
Man, they've done it really well. So they started with their first one in Venice, man, and they've continued to evolve that location, and then they've got Grand Blanco across the street, and then you've got multiple other Great Whites, and it's classic Australian hospitality at its perennial best. And the food is very, market forward. It's got like super colorful ingredients. The acai bowl, which I had yesterday, is like it's got this beautiful blue color with our house-made granola. And then you got this like harvest plate, and it's also a vibe. Like you go there and going, everyone's beautiful. Everyone's clearly been listening to the Genius Live. And like, this is the thing. It's like, it's an awesome place to be. So you feel good eating quality food.
Is there anything like distinctly Australian about it?
Yeah, man. Like, if you haven't been to Australia, have you?
I've never been, no.
Oh, dude. Like, you go there and our brekkie scene is unmatched. So, like, that's one thing I've learned about hospitality over here is, like, Australian hospitality, a bit more chill, still professional, but a bit more relaxed. Like, if you're listening to this podcast and if you've been to a cafe that's Aussie, the conversation you're having is more friendly and somewhat like the person feels like they're your mate already. Like, you don't even know them, but they'll find a little bit extra about you for you to have a good time. That's big in Australia. Like make a friend with the customer, and then we create like a relationship where the having a coffee, which is what we do in Australia for socially, isn't just like a time of day where you get your caffeine hit. It's like a big part of our social interaction. Like you'll go and get a good quality coffee before work on your way or after a run or whatever it is, and you create this vibe, and then all of a sudden, as you'll see, like Great White, people are just like they love the health and wellness space, which is like a huge part of Australia. Most of Australia lives on the coast of Australia, and so your access to beach, access to like the sun, and all this like beautiful, just outdoorsy kind of vibe is ever present. So in all that the demand on that has put food and the F&B space to be more that lifestyle culture. And so now you're seeing that with our restaurants.
It's amazing. Last year I got to spend a ton of time in London, and I fell in love with the full English breakfast.
Bangers and mash, the spread, fry up.
It's like a fry up, yeah. It's like you've got like this amazing sausage, eggs, baked beans, which as an American, like the thing about like having baked beans with breakfast makes zero sense until you actually have it in England, and it's like 10 out of 10. It's so freaking good. Is there an Australian equivalent of like the full English, like the full Aussie?
Yeah, we got a big Aussie brekkie. I've got a big Aussie brekkie at the restaurant at Osprey's. Like we do, what do we do? We do my amazing self-proclaimed amazing kidney beans. So we do this cannellini kidney bean red sauce reduction. We got this hash, which is essentially potatoes that we grate down to like hash itself, that we square up and press in the hotel pan and then cut and then have it like seared on the grill. It's so good with eggs, some sort of toast. And I would say like option of bacon. We've got this beef bacon now. So we get like oh dude, it's insane.
Whoa, beef bacon?
Beef bacon, bro.
I've never had that.
It's so good. So anyone who's Jewish is going to love this place.
Oh my God, I'm down.
Yeah, dude, it's so...
I mean, I eat pork too, but I'm so down for beef bacon.
Dude, it's better. Like I've had plenty of pork bacon in my life. Beef bacon is just, it's so good, man.
You have this in your restaurant?
Have it in my restaurant. And that's the thing, dude. Like avocado toast, like wherever you go, that was invented in Australia.
Was it?
I'm just saying it is.
Dude, that is so funny. Going back to spices, because I mean, spices are incredibly important. They're also very low in calories. They're also like super concentrated in a lot of these like micronutrients that you're talking about.
Dude.
For somebody that like doesn't yet have a spice rack, what are some staples?
Okay, cumin, coriander, and paprika. And even if you can't get coriander, I'd say cumin, paprika. If you can handle heat, cayenne for sure. And then I think like if you can get mustard, like ground mustard seeds, or just get mustard seeds themselves and then ground them down. Like the average person's not going to do that. But mustard seeds ground, really good. Obviously, the sulforaphane, the benefits there, but they just add extra umami. And so that's what you like, the savory note that we want. If you want to go a step further, you go onion and garlic powder, which are super concentrated versions of what they are. So I think they're the kind of things I'd tiptoe on. Then I think the next stage is like sumac, which is this beautiful zestiness to them. You can even get like a combination of like you can go into spice blends like garam masala, which is 4 of the amazing spices in themselves, and with enriched from like the regions of India, which in itself spice land there is awesome. But as you said, what's great is each of them has their own purpose and antioxidants, rich benefit, or polyphenol. And so like, you can almost count them as adding extra plants to your day, to your week, just simply by adding them in. And it just sexifies plants. It really does.
It's like a spice starter pack right there.
Yeah, dude. Like if you've just got like whole pumpkin, right? So you take a pumpkin, cut it into maybe wedges, roast it with olive oil, salt and pepper, garlic, and then some of these spices. Like, dude, that in itself will take you what I call time on the tools. It'll take you 7 minutes. right? It may take 25 minutes to cook, but you've got like 18 minutes or so to kind of scroll Instagram, go on an email, maybe cook the rest of something else you're doing. It's like people don't realize cooking doesn't take long for the simplest terms. Sheet pan dinners, so easy. Just make sure that you realize what time it takes to cook. It may take you 40 minutes for it to cook and be finished, but it may only take you 10 minutes of your time to actually make it.
So true. I know it's like kind of like picking a favorite child, but do you have a favorite recipe in the book?
I don't yet. I do have ones that I love, which is, far out. Which is my favorite? Dude. Okay. Sweet potato gnocchi is always going to be a win. My macadamia cookies are fire. Banana bread.
Whoa.
This banana bread.
I love a good banana bread.
Yeah, and Lindsay Vonn loves it. So like it's so good. So I would say, we got the bowl. We got a whole section on bowls. Like we got meals. Like don't get me wrong. Like things that I'd say for dinner. But the publishing team's like, Dan, your world, love a good bowl. Can you do a full set of bowls? So like a full Monday to Friday set of bowls.
I love a good bowl.
Yeah, dude. I know. Last time you and I were talking, it was like we're talking about all the bowl places popping up, and now some of these guys have reached 1,000 stores and stuff like that, and we're just like crazy.
I think in a past life I must have been a dog or something because I love eating out of anything in a bowl. Like I just love, but anything bowl.
I know, dude. It's crazy.
I don't like bowling, but I like eating out of a bowl. Yeah.
What's your bowling game? Is it because are you good at bowling? No, okay.
Not at all, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll leave bowling to the food aspect of it.
Dude, well, it's so cool, man. Thanks for coming in and like sharing all this with us.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah. Walk me through the cookbook. Like what, like other than recipes, I know you've got this whole like front of the book section where you've got, a lot of the kind of concepts that we've talked about. But yeah, like what was the process like?
Mate, it was, you've written a book. It's like the idea behind writing any book for this matter is a timely thing. But for this one, I was super passionate. I realized it was the first book that I was bringing together something that I don't think anyone else had done before. Yes, there's been cookbooks. Yes, people have touched on certain aspects around, biohacking and such, but bringing together the idea about application of food, not in this space, is what I wanted to do. So, being able to shoot it ourselves, do it all with the team, and test all these recipes on my friends too. Like what I did initially with my very first book, which is instead of doing recipe testing myself, I gave it to all my friends and got them to actually test it out. So it was really, really cool to have that feedback and have them involved in the whole process. So the cookbook was, something that I've wanted to do for a while. Unfortunately, Chris was just a legend and wanted to forward it as well, and has led us to this position now where the book will help people truly understand the understanding of performance and food, and maybe understand what to eat before bed to improve your sleep versus, we talked about the 5th macronutrient.
Wait, what can I eat before bed to improve my sleep?
Oh, dude, you got this in the bag. This is all your stuff, right? Like blueberries.
Blueberries help?
Yeah, dude. We talked about their relationship with the brain, help you get into a better, because we know slow wave sleep's at the start, right? Then you got REM sleep. It helps you get into a better deep sleep.
Whoa. I know kiwi also. There's like some small study that found that eating kiwi before bed.
How good's fruit, bro?
Fruit is great.
Yeah.
Also kiwi, very interesting, very good for constipation. Like almost better than psyllium husk or some other. They tested it. It was like a head-to-head against like psyllium husk or some other like commonly taken supplement or laxative or something like that. And
kiwi won?
Yeah, kiwi's great.
Oh, wow. So if you go to the bathroom.
Well, you don't want to go to the bathroom in your sleep. Yeah. But apparently it's like it's a 2-for-1. Like it's great for sleep and it's also great for digestive health.
There you go, man. That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah. How do you know Chris Hemsworth? How do you know Thor?
How do I know Thor? The joke would be that I just let him have this Marvel character that went to me first. No, so one of the companies I work with is Center, and Center is a health and wellness brand founded by Chris. So he started this brand that would be an extension of how he lives his life. And I met him about 5 years ago at a Tourism Australia event, and we're talking about food, we're talking about like nutrition, and effectively what happened was dude, I'm thinking of doing this, what started out as an app. So, you may get an email from me in 9 months or something like that. And sure enough, I didn't think it was going to happen. But 8 months later, I got an email from his team saying, hey, Dan, we want you to be involved in this app. And they wanted me to essentially be the face of food and help people come on the app, understand the best ways to eat certain foods, recipe hacks, tips, but then also play a role in the actual exercise area as well. So we've got a whole fitness category of workouts that people can do. And so now we've got into equipment. Have you heard of Hyrox as well?
No.
So we've now become the equipment supplier of a circuit-style training competition, which is Hyrox. And so the business has now got equipment you can sell at Walmart, Amazon, and the company as a whole is much greater, which is awesome. And Chris, now working with the company and with him for 3 or 4 years, I see him, and the last time I was like, hey, dude, I'm doing a book. Pretty much epitomizes everything that we've talked about. And he's like, I'm like, do you mind if put a couple of words together? And he was like, yeah, dude.
That's awesome. And he's Aussie too, is he not?
Aussie dude, yeah, dude. So like, that's a thing. He's such a relatable guy, man. He really is. And being an Aussie, I feel like we have this, people say this like almost like chilled out way of being professional. And it's just like I've got 2 brothers, he's got 2 brothers, and so like all our mates are like Luke Zocchi, who's also on the in part of the Wealth of Business, and he's a close mate of mine. So you got this like close knit friendship group, and you kind of look out for each other. So that's why I find when working with these companies is like I like to work with people I'd have a beer or a red wine or cook for, because it just makes things a lot more enjoyable. And it's particularly when you're on the same path of making health and wellness more appealing and approachable and achievable for the everyday legend. So
yeah, I mean, it's so important. It's so important because
exactly,
we are in the midst of a health crisis. I mean, so many people are unwell.
What do you think of that 1 billion mark of obesity?
Oh man, what is that? 1 billion people around the world
are obese. Yeah.
I hadn't heard that statistic, but I mean it doesn't surprise me, and it's shocking. It should be to anybody.
It's a big number, right? Here's my thinking about how many people are there in the world.
8 billion.
Right. So in Australia, 1 in 3 people are obese. In America, I think it's something similar.
It's close to 1 in 2.
1 in 2. Yeah. So then 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 people across the world. Okay, so we have a bit of work to do.
Yeah.
But it just shows how bad America and Australia are.
Really bad. Yeah. 1 in 8 across the world, but 1 in 2 in the United States.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
I will say some of the ways that people quantify obese are still quite inaccurate. Like I'm technically overweight.
Yeah. Well, if you're going by the BMI is like fairly ineffective as a diagnostic tool, but I mean, and there are still people struggling, unfortunately with hunger in the world, and and that's a big problem.
That's a bigger problem, in my opinion. Working to find ways to make actual nutrition available to those in need, malnourishment,
But it is interesting. We are living in the first time in human history where there are more overweight people walking the earth than underweight.
Oh, that is scary.
Yeah, that is scary. And we're leading the charge here in the United States, apparently.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know of any country where the obesity prevalence is higher.
Higher than that, it's 50%.
Yeah. I mean, that could exist. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I know that it's pretty damn high here.
And you would think people have access to food here compared.
I would shudder to think of a country where obesity rates are higher.
Yeah.
I
mean, I'd be scared for that country if that were the case.
I mean, 1 in 2 is pretty bad.
That's really bad. We can change this though. We can do it.
I think so. It starts with cooking at home more.
Yeah, exactly, dude.
And where the rubber meets the road is with food. It's with like being able to craft easy to produce, easy to cook, delicious recipes that make it all, as effortless as can be.
Absolutely, dude. I saw your pans downstairs. You've been cooking.
Oh, I cook all the time. I mean, I do eat out quite a bit too, but I've got it dialed in where I eat primarily at restaurants where I know it's easy to get healthy food. Places like yours in New York City, super easy.
Dude, I remember you were telling me you told me because you're big on seed oils, right? You were talking about that, and you were like, okay, I can't go here because I know how much seed oil they have. I remember the conversation. I was like, the dude's dialed in.
I shudder to think about what I talked about, whatever that was, 5-6 years ago at this point. Yeah. I mean, eating out in restaurants, seed oils are a big problem because you don't know how the seed oils are, these like ultra processed, refined, bleached, and deodorized oils are stored. You don't know if they've been reused. That's, I think, the most worrisome way in which they're ingested, in the restaurant setting, particularly in the fryer setting. I don't bring them into my house. I know that, eating out in restaurants, I'm being exposed to them. I try not to worry about them. I don't know, maybe I was a little bit more fixated on them, a couple of years ago. I still think that they're problematic, but I think as long as you're eating whole food, like whole minimally processed food, and you're integrating as your primary oil extra virgin olive oil, which has a ton of evidence behind it, then you know, there's no need to fear seed oils.
No.
But yeah, just like do the best you can.
Eat whole foods with intent. That's all it is.
With
like,
intent.
Be super intentional. Control the controllable. So you can control what you go shopping for, what you don't shop for. That's even better. So if you know you're going to eat chocolates and candy and crap, don't purchase it.
Exactly.
So you don't run into
Keep them out of the freaking shopping cart.
Exactly, dude.
Yeah. Exactly. If you have the luxury of knowing what your trigger foods are, just keep them out of the house.
Exactly. Control the controllable.
Exactly. Dude, this was so fun. Where can people pick up the book, and where can they find you on social media to support?
Yeah, man. So the book's available wherever books are sold. Just came out yesterday, this week. Yeah. So wherever books are sold, pick it up, and it's a great book for those who are looking to get in the kitchen. If you're a mother, you know, husband, or someone who's trying to look after someone else, great idea for them. So wherever books are sold, and then just Dan Churchill on all platforms: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Do you TikTok?
I'm on it. I'm on TikTok.
Not active?
Not super active. I like cross posts, you know, some stuff on there sometimes. But yeah, I'm not a Gen Zer, at least. In reality, in my head, I might be, but yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I'm overwhelmed with social media as it is. So it's I try to
limit it a little bit.
YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah.
And as it is, I spend too much time on those platforms. So
it's a great way to learn.
Yeah, no thanks. Last question that gets asked everyone on the show: what does living a genius life mean to you?
It's a great point, dude. I was waiting for this one. I would say for me, man, it is living the life that I'm talking about right now. It's essentially, I love the idea of happiness, and that is an indicator of how healthy I am. And so if that means I'm being a genius in the sense that for me, I am socially, physically, mentally, cognitively, and ultimately spiritually super happy and aligned, because that makes me realize I'm super healthy and living the life I want to be living.
Genius.
Dude.
Love it, brother.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Anytime, dude.
Thank you guys for listening. Pick up Dan's cookbook, Eat Like a Legend. It's badass. And he's the cover, dude, is so nice. It's almost like it's almost nicer than my cover. It's not quite as nice.
Definitely not. Yeah. Definitely not.
No, it's pretty nice. I'm jelly. It's a great cover. Definitely pick it up, guys, and share this episode with friends and loved ones that you think may benefit from it. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.